First Sergeant Kip here with Company D, 2nd United States Sharpshooters, and today in the workshop, we are beginning an exciting short series of studying a classic Civil War book, looking at its illustrations and trying to recreate its camp furniture and camp items. And for this, I couldn't think of a better book to start with than John Billings' legendary Hardtack and Coffee. This is a nice little first edition I picked up on a recent trip to the state of Maine, and it has wonderful project ideas that I would like to start making with you. And there is a wonderful project that I've been wanting to do for some time, and it is a great beginner woodworking project, and that is the humble camp table. So let's take a look at what some of these tables look like. So in this first image of the inside of a winter quarters, we see a camp table made out of what looks like a hardtack box. Now, what I like about this image is clearly the soldiers were addressing a couple of problems. One, they needed a table, so they took a box and they put legs on it. And two, because it's a hardtack box and hardtack boxes are so deep, they cut a relief out in the side so that way their knees could fit underneath it. So this could also probably be more of a working desk rather than just, like a side table, for example. But then if we look at this next image of the inside of a Sibley tent, again, we see another camp table. This one appears a little bit smaller. We can't quite tell what the box is or was. But I noticed as I was studying the legs, at least one of the legs appears to me to look like a tree branch. And that would fit with a lot of the period photographs that I've seen of camp furniture that utilizes tree branches for all sorts of different table legs and other camp items, because they're readily accessible and you need a minimal amount of tools in order to put them into service. And that really speaks to the disposable nature of all of this furniture, because as we see in this next photo of soldiers getting ready to leave camp, on the top of the fire is another camp table. So these were really just made out of found items intended to serve a purpose for a short amount of time, which is why I think that you see so many images with just 4 legs. Now you may be thinking, well, don't tables have 4 legs? Like, yes, but they also don't have stretchers, which would add a lot of stability and would take more work and more materials. So I think for the table I'm going to build, I'm going to put some stretchers on the table for a little more rigidity and stability in camp. But by all means, you can recreate these camp tables exactly as you see in the images, either from smaller boards or from really nice tree branches just nailed into the corners. But that comes to another question that we need to address. What size should it be? And as we look later on in the book, they show an image of a fully loaded wagon with all sorts of different sizes and styles of boxes. So that tells us we have some artistic flexibility in how we design our camp table. But that leaves me still curious, like what were some common sizes? I don't want to just pick a random size. I'm kind of curious, what were some standards of the time? Well, sadly, in my research, I haven't been able to find any standard, just generic crate sizes. But because I am a historical woodworker, I also collect historic woodworking books, and I particularly enjoy books, woodworking books and mechanic books for children. And so I had to look through a number of books in my collection because they would talk about crates, but again, they wouldn't mention the size because it was just common knowledge. If someone 120, 150 years ago said, like, make a desk out of a grocery box, everyone knew how big a grocery box was. But we don't know how big that was. And so this book, this is a really popular author of the time period. He made all sorts of different books like this. This one is a 1918 issue. So any of you World War I fans, there's a great section on kids' World War I toys. But in here, we have a whole chapter on box furniture, because these are children's books. So in a lot of these old woodworking books from the 1880s, 1890s to the early 20th century, there's usually some form of project dedicated to utilizing some form of found box to make furniture for a kid's room. And they can be pretty cool. Everything from, you know, really nice desks to upholstered stools and chairs, rockers. But what was key about this book for me is they actually finally gave us some dimensions. So this grocery box measures 9 inches deep, 11 inches wide, and 15 inches long. But with those dimensions, and this is for a stool that they're going to make, but there's a series of box furniture projects in here. So this is sort of I'm taking an amalgamation of a couple of projects in here. But you can see here, they're addressing the same issue as that first Billings illustration. This box is too deep. So they recommend that the kids cut a few inches off the bottom, so that way, you know, it works proportionally in this case, but they can size the box to their needs. The other thing I like is they have stretchers. Now, again, we're working with children, and so they are just nailing their stretchers on. And that alone would be a great way to add some simple stability to your camp table. I think I might be a little extra. I'm planning on doing some like a half lap dovetail stretcher, just because I think it looks nice and I like doing it. So we have some dimensions to start from. Now we have to think about what sort of materials we're going to use. Well, you can make an ammo box and, you know, paint it and put some legs on it. That would work. You could do the hardtack box. But all of that really nice pine wood can be expensive and a bit cost prohibitive for some people, especially beginning woodworkers. And crates were generally rough. Like, they are not, you know, just like pallets today, right? Pallets aren't fine furniture. They're sort of junky wood. So this project, I am going to utilize fence pickets. And because they're about 5.5 inches wide, and that fits the design of that cut down grocery crate pretty closely. They cut it down to like 6 inches, but 5.5 works, and I think it'll look a little bit better proportionally, and it's really accessible. The nice thing about fence pickets is they're rough sawn. So you don't have to do any sort of historical finishing. You don't have to take a finished board and run it through a bandsaw to make it look roughed up. You're good to go here. My biggest tip when it comes to using fence pickets is, unless you can get your hands on seasoned fence pickets, you'll need to kind of start this project maybe a couple months after you buy them from the home store. If your fence pickets are just soaking wet, your table's gonna do weird things, and it's not gonna be fun to work with. So you might want to get your fence pickets and let them dry out in, you know, your shop or your garage or your house or whatever. I think you only need about 2 for this project. And then I'm just gonna use a scrap piece of 2x that I don't intend to use for anything else to make my legs. Then all we have to do is quit yakking and get cutting. Right now I am working on the bottom of the box, or in our case, the top of our table. I've made the choice to go ahead and smooth out this surface. I'm not trying to flatten it, I'm just trying to clean it up. I think it'll make it more useful and easier to care for. But if you're going for the rustic look, you can skip this point entirely. So now that we have all of our pieces nailed together, we now have a crate to start building out our table. I began by following the dimensions in the Carpentry and Mechanics book for boys, but it wasn't what I was looking for. So I modified the dimensions a little bit on the fly. And that's the great thing about Civil War woodworking, or just woodworking in general, is that you can customize your pieces to fit your particular needs, or just the style and look of your piece. But now that we have a crate, it's time to put some legs on it. Now the book recommends using 7/8 stock. Now that might seem a bit strange today because most of the stuff that you get at the home center is going to be 1x, or actually 3/4 inch by whatever. Now as you get into historical reproductions in woodworking, paying close attention to the importance of stock choice will really set your pieces apart. Now, throughout history, stock was typically thicker. So generally your 1 inch would be closer to 1 inch. And over time, milling and drying processes changed, and so stock dimensions changed with it. So it would be much more common to have, say, 13/16 or 7/8 stock in a shop 160 years ago. So one way to make your pieces stand out is to vary the dimensions of wood that you have. Obviously, you can make your stuff all out of 3/4 inch stock or whatever fence pickets you plan on using. But if you have the ability to vary the dimensions of your wood, it will really stand out as being unique and different and a little truer to the time period. So I just grabbed some scrap wood that I had and I roughed out the pieces. These are actually, I think, a little under 3/4 because I was trying to use up scrap wood that I didn't want to really use on anything else. So you just cut it to the dimensions, you figure out the height of the table that you want. Again, you can customize it however you like. And then we have to fit our piece. So as you can see here, I have already started working on it a little bit. So one nice thing I like about the design in the 1919 book is that have you cut these notches into your pieces so that you get a little bit more stability and rigidity to your finished product. So essentially you can just cut this notch out, stick it in the corner of your box, and nail it into place, and you're done. So how do we get some good accurate measurements on here? So for all of you traditional woodworkers out there, you know that measuring is the enemy of accuracy. And that might seem kind of strange. Well, I don't know how thick this piece of wood is. I don't know how thick this piece of wood is. I don't really care. So what I do is you take your blank for your leg, you find the corner that you're going to place it into, and I'm not measuring any distances to measure up to that piece. I'm just going to stick my piece in there, and on the side that I'm going to put my notch, I take my marking knife, I make an indent on the 2 corners, then I'll take my handy dandy square, and I will connect these lines for a nice accurate measurement specific to that piece. So just line that up. And we have our marked line. But how thick is this side wall that we have to cut our notch into? Again, we're not going to break out any measuring devices. We're just going to take our marking gauge. So we take our marking gauge and we set it on the edge of the piece. and we set it to that exact dimension. I'll set this down for a minute so I can get the most accurate reading I can. And just like that, I know that the part that I need to cut off needs to be this thick. I don't know how thick that is, doesn't matter. So I go to my marked edge right here, take my marking gauge, and I just scratch a line. Taking my time, light passes, so you can have nice, clean, finished product. And then always reference the same edge for increased accuracy. And we'll follow these scratch lines over the edge, and then this is the part that we cut out and we have a leg. And just like that, you have your legs. The only thing left to do is nail them onto your crate and you have a finished table. Now, the picture from the book shows nailing from the outside in. So you would really want to clamp your legs onto this crate as strongly as you can to keep this leg from like wiggling and trying to escape the nails. You could put a dab of glue on it, but the wood is going to shrink and expand this way. So the glue probably wouldn't hold for very long, especially since this is going to be outside at events, being exposed to maximum humidity fluctuations. You could nail it from the inside out, but I think that would be a particular challenge. But if you just drilled some pilot holes on the outside and clamped it really tight, you could even put a spacer piece of wood on the inside to kind of support this piece internally. That would also help your case. Now, you may be wondering, where do I get my nails? I get them from the Tremont Nail Company. I've ordered nails from them for years. They got good prices and a wide variety of sizes available for your reproduction needs. Now on this project, I have deliberately used nails that are too long. And that is a good thing, because what we can do is clench those nails to make sure the legs stay on even better. Technically, we're just bending the nails over because a full clench would be bent a second time. So that way when you bend the nail head over, it looks like this. And when you finally hammer it into the wood, it works like a staple. But this is a very old building technique. And we got a table. Our fence pickets, the best thing to use for fine joinery? Nope, but we're gonna give it a shot. So I have a 1-inch strip here. I'm gonna hold up to my workpiece. make a mark. Square that line across. I'm going to take it over to the miter saw. Now normally you would take a lot of time laying out your dovetails with perfectly dimensioned stock. But this is camp-made furniture, and I wanted to tell a story. So it's not uncommon for professional woodworkers of the time to just eyeball their joinery, because we cut the other piece to fit, and if things are a little organic, it will just add to the story of the piece and its maker. So now it is time to trace my dovetail onto my leg. And I just have these stretchers coming up 3 inches from the bottom. And just make sure they're nice and square. And using a marking knife, just tracing these tails as accurately as I can. So now we have our marks. But now we have to figure out how deep we're going to go. And for that, we're going to go to our trusty marking gauge. There are other gauges you can use. You can use one of these really nice, modern, fancy ones if you have them. But sometimes I just try to limit myself to the common tools of the time period. So, it needs to be that deep. And then just bring those marks down. On the inside and the outside, I'm sure that's really difficult for you to see, so I'll pencil that in a little bit for you. So you just transfer your lines all the way around your piece, and then you cut out the waste, and in goes your dovetail. With our quick and dirty dovetail stretchers in, I'm going to call this project done. This is a delightful and very sturdy little camp table, and it's very beginner friendly because we don't use any fancy or hard to get woods, and because it's a field-made project, it's very forgiving for beginning woodworking skills, because soldiers would make this out of whatever they could find around camp with whatever tools they could find around camp. And soldiers of the time had wildly different abilities when it came to making things. What they were trying to do was add a little bit of function and comfort around their camp. Now I'm just going to leave this little rustic table as it is, with all my marking lines and pencil marks, because they wouldn't have spent a whole lot of time dressing this up, because when camp moved, odds are this was going to go in the burn pile. However, if this is going to be a piece of long-term furniture, I'm sure you could put a finish on it. No stains, that's not really a thing of the time period. But if you wanted to oil it with some boiled linseed oil or something like that, that would help out a little bit. One little trick that I like to do on my pieces is you can paint or seal the end grain on your legs to help prevent moisture wicking up in the table, but again, that's just an added bonus. The other thing that you could do if you wanted to kind of keep upping the authenticity and have your piece tell a richer story is do some research online and see if there is some form of company stencil that you could put somewhere on the box. Maybe it's a lot number. Maybe your crate is being designed after a sardine or oyster box, maybe a crate of peaches or something like that. Something that could add to the richness and the depth of the story that we're trying to tell with our field-made pieces. But with all of that, I hope you've enjoyed this project. I look forward to bringing back to life more things that we find in Hardtack and Coffee and other period resources. Thanks as always for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.